Hi everybody, Shane here, and today I'm going to teach you how to play Ultra Tiny Epic Kingdoms solo mode. So Ultra Tiny Epic Kingdoms is a 4X game designed by Scott Almes, put out by Gamelin Games. A 4X game, if you don't know, stands for Expand, Explore, Exploit, and Exterminate. So basically it's a sort of kingdom building game. A lot of them take place in space, but basically you're going to start in an area, you're going to start to exploit the land for resources, expand your armies, explore into other territories, and eventually fight and try to exterminate your foes. So Ultra Tiny Epic Kingdoms is an ultra tiny version of Tiny Epic Kingdoms. I think the designers, they just decided, let's see how small we can make this thing as an experiment. They didn't know how if it would be a very popular thing or what, but they just decided to see if they could do it. And I think they really succeeded well. The whole thing fits into this box that's no bigger than a deck of cards. Everything you see here, from the cubes, the cards, there's all these extra territory and faction cards here, and for multiplayer games there's more of the tracker cards. The version I got came with this die. I don't know if every version comes with it. And so the only thing you can't fit in the box is the die, but also it came with this bag, so I could definitely fit everything into this bag. But everything but the die that you see here, including this manual, all fits in this tiny box. So it's pretty awesome, and it's almost exactly the same as the regular Tiny Epic Kingdoms. However, in this, it includes the solo mode, which is essentially just basically this card is really what gives you the solo mode. But for the regular version, you have to buy the expansion in order to get this compass card. So it's an awesome game. It plays 2 to 5 players, coming in at about 30 to 45 minutes. However, I will now teach you how to play solo. So let's get to it. So as I was learning it the other day, this really tiny manual, I was flipping back and forth to catch the rules and how the dummy player plays, because what you're going to do is you're going to be playing against a dummy player and using this compass and in conjunction with the die to determine what the dummy player does. So because I was flipping back and forth and I decided to write up my own reference sheet that I'll make prettier and I'll put out on Board Game Geek and I'll link to in this video. So I'm pretty much just going to go through this for the most part. So after you watch this video, you'll be able to print this out and you can then do it yourself or follow along. Why not? So let's get to it. So to set up, first you're going to place the compass card in the center, day side up. So this compass card has a day side and a night side. Every time you clear the actions card, you're going to flip this card over. You can see right here it says on card clear. So when the action card is cleared, you flip this card and your opponent collects one of each resources. So every time you have to flip from day to night, the dummy player will get one of each resource. In addition to that, whether it's day or night determines the war cost of the dummy player. I'll get into that later, and also the selection priority of the dummy player. I'll get into that as well. So you place this in the center, day side up, then you place the action card to the left with the 5 action cubes next to or near it. I kind of like to put it underneath here. You place the tower card to the right. Then you're going to select a faction and player color for you and the dummy player. You can do this either random or choose your factions. Right now I just did this random, so I actually ended up being the Order of Gamelin. This is probably more complicated than other factions. And then I picked the Halflings randomly. Oh, this is a 3+ game only, so this might not work with solo. So hey, let's just swap that out with the card right here, because I wanted to show you this card in a minute. So all these cards, basically, to make it tinier, they just put all the territory cards and the factions just on each card double-sided. So now it's the Elves. So they're going to be the Elves. And then you will pick a territory card for you and the dummy player. Now, territories should be chosen randomly, but of course, if you want, you could choose. So you're going to place the dummy player's territory above the compass card and your territory right underneath. And then you'll have your faction and tracker cards for each of you beyond the territories. Just have all the cards facing you. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a purple color for me, orange for the dummy. These are the other optional colors. You could play multiplayer or for solo, you could use them. These are just mana, ore, and food cubes, so those I've already got one of each for each of us. So each player's cubes are going to be various things. They're going to be markers for the tower card, their research, magic level, the war, cost selection, and then they're also their armies. So at this point, you're going to pick any one forest and any one mountain on the dummy player's sheet and put one army on each. So just because I'm going to put one on that forest and one on this mountain. And for me, just like in a regular game setup, I'm going to put 2 cubes in any one region on my territory. I'm going to start in the mountain since I only have 1 ore to start. So then the dummy player starts with 3 of each resource, which I've already given them. And then you start with a total of 6 resources between the 3 resource cubes. So red represents ore, green represents mana, yellow represents food. They recommend for beginners to start with 1 ore, 2 mana, and 3 food. So you put 1 cube for each player below the tower card, and 1 below their faction card for researching their magic levels, and then 1 next to each war track. So now you're ready to begin. So you will alternate turns just as in a multiplayer game. The dummy player will always follow your action if it is able to. If it can't take the action, then it collects resources as normal as per its occupied regions. Meaning just like in a multiplayer game, when you collect resources, you will collect 1 resource per region that you occupy. And a quick note, no region can ever have more than 2 armies in it. So when moving into any region, even if you're moving in with an enemy and a war is going to break out, if there's 2 enemy armies there, you cannot move into it. You cannot move into a space with your own 2 armies. So maximum 2 armies per region. So as you research your magic, you're going to gain certain abilities. Every level you go up, you get that level and everything below it. So this is a little bit of the asymmetric element to this game, where every faction is going to have different abilities that will assist them in different ways. And the dummy player does benefit from its magic level. Magic level also counts as points at the end of the game. So the way a game of Tiny Epic Kingdoms plays out is there will be an active player. So the rules say whoever swung a sword last gets to start as the active player, otherwise determined randomly. So whoever the active player is, they're going to take one of the gray cubes and place it in front of one of these actions that has not been chosen yet. Okay, so if I wanted to build, I could place the cube here next to build. Then I would pay 1 ore to go up to this level on the tower track. So each level of the tower track costs this much ore. So level 1 costs 1 ore, level 2 costs 2 ore, level 3 costs 3. You cannot go up more than 1 level in 1 action. So if I pick the build action, now the dummy player can follow. It's the same in a multiplayer game. The active player picks an action, everyone can then follow. So when playing the dummy player, they must take the action if they're able to. And right now, the dummy player is. So the dummy player would spend 1 ore, now down at 2, and go to the first level of the tower card. In a multiplayer game, if a player cannot or doesn't want to follow the action, they can collect resources. Against the dummy player, they must follow your action if able. When collecting resources, you simply collect the type of resource 1 for every region you occupy. So mountains get ore, forests get mana, and plains get food. So then after a player goes and players follow, you would change the active player. So you're going to go back and forth like this until all 5 action cubes are out. You cannot do one of the same actions twice until the card is cleared. So there are 6 actions and only 5 action cubes. So every time you clear, there will be 1 action that was not selected. So when a player's turn starts and the action card is full, they just start by clearing the action card and then they will take their action. Whenever this happens when you're playing the dummy player, you will flip the compass to the other side. So from day to night or night to day. So when you flip it from day to night, the dummy player will collect 1 of each resource. So you keep going back and forth until game end triggers are met. So after one player takes an action and anyone follows, before it goes to the next player's turn, you will check to see if any of the game end triggers have been met. So end game triggers are, if a player has all 7 of their armies out, that's an end game trigger. If a player has reached the 6th top level of the tower, that's an end game trigger. Or if a player has reached the 5th highest level of magic, that's an end game trigger. So when the end game is triggered, you keep playing until the next time the action card is going to be cleared. And then at that point, the game immediately ends and you score. So when you score, you will first remove any armies that are in ruins spaces. So I purposely picked this region that has a ruins space. This is what the ruins look like. I'll tell you what those mean later. But you'll remove any armies from ruin spaces because they're considered lost. And then you get 1 point for each army you have in play. Then you will get 1 point for each level of magic. So if you're at the 4th level, you get 4 points, 3rd level 3, and so on. If you're at the highest level, the 5th level, all the 5th levels of magic come with a bonus. So plus any bonus points for the 5th level. Then you will get points equal to the level you are on the tower card. So level 1 is 0, level 2 is 1 point, 2 points, 4 points, 7 points, and 10 points. And then, if you occupy any capital cities, which are the regions that look like this. They're pretty much clear with castles and village stuff. If you occupy any capital cities, you get 2 points. In a multiplayer game, it's possible to have alliances, and if you share a capital city, you get 1 point each. But in the solo game, you will not have an alliance. And after you've counted up the score, the highest score wins. If there happens to be a tie, there are tiebreakers. First, most armies in play. Then, highest tower level. Then, highest magic level reached. Then, highest total combined resources. If a tie still remains after all that, the game just ends in a tie. So that's basically how the game is going to play out. Now let me describe for you each of the actions and how the dummy player will play these actions. So if it is the dummy player's turn, you will roll a 12-sided die. The result is what the dummy player will do. So you use the compass card. So you can see there are 12 spots on the compass card. So I rolled a 1, and you can see a 1 is research. Okay. So if the research action was already taken, then you would simply continue around the compass until you hit an action that is not already taken. Now, even once you get to an action that has not been taken, it is possible the dummy player cannot take the action, and if that is the case, they can collect resources. In a multiplayer game, you cannot collect resources if you are the active player, but in the case of the dummy player, they can collect resources when they are the active player. So now let's go through the actions one by one using the action card. The first action is patrol. Patrol is basically taking any one army and moving into a region that is directly adjacent to the region that army is in. Adjacent means they share a border with another region. So right now, this mountain is adjacent to these 2 forests. These gray things, they are crags. You can never cross over crags or any water, either lakes, oceans, or whatever this is, or rivers. There are rivers that roll through. And actually, I wanted to show you this card. This card has the most advanced rivers, I guess you could say, because from this plains, you can't get to that plains, you can't get to this forest, so you'd have to go from here to this forest, to this mountain, to this forest, etc. Only this forest and these 2 plains are actually on the border of the card, which is how you travel when you're questing. If you are patrolling, you go from one region on a territory to another region on that same territory. Remember, each of these cards is a territory. Inside the cards are regions. So a player cannot move into a region that already has 2 armies. The dummy player will never move into a region that has its army in it already. So the dummy player will actually never have 2 armies in one region. So if the dummy player is patrolling, if they are the active player, you use that first die roll to choose which army is going to patrol. If the dummy player is following you, you will then roll the die to get them a die result. So you use the compass again to choose the army. So you basically look at the direction that the number is going. So 1 is going here, it hits that region, so we would just pick that army. Now if I had rolled a 6, that's pointing down here, and the dummy player has no armies down here. So then if it doesn't hit any dummy player armies, you just continue around the compass till you hit 1. So if I had rolled a 6, then basically it would be 11 here that hits this army in that region. Now you'll notice on the compass card there's a selection priority. So if it was 11, you could think, okay, well it hits both the forest and the mountain, which do I pick? When it's daytime, you pick the closer one. When it's nighttime, you pick the further one. After you determine which army the dummy will patrol, you then roll the die to determine which direction they move. So I rolled a 6, so that would be here, so we'll go around until we hit 12, which would make them move into the capital here. Capital just barely shares a border with that forest. And that is patrolling. So the next action is quest. So you notice this symbol shows a meeple going left or right. So that means, adjacent regions. Questing, you'll see a meeple going from one card to the other. So questing is taking any one army that is in a region that is touching the border of one territory, going to a completely different territory into a region that touches the border there. So you'll see, on my territory, this region does not touch the border. The water does not count. It's got to be the border of the card. So all other regions on this territory touch the border. So one could quest from any of these regions to another region on another card touching the border. So you'll notice on the dummy player's card, all the regions except the capital touch the border. So no one could quest right into the capital. They would have to quest into one of these regions, then move into the capital. So it was at this point that I realized I forgot to finish the patrol. So you'll notice the cube just moved at this point because I backtracked and finished showing you how to finish the patrol action for the dummy player. So to quest for the dummy player, if they chose quest when you rolled the die, you would use that value. If they are following you, you will roll the die to get a value. So it's a 2. We are selecting which army of the dummy player will quest. So 2 goes that way. So we're going to go around the compass and we're going to hit this army. So this army is going to quest. Now let's determine where they're going to quest. Woo, 5. So 5 is pointed here. So they will quest right into the ruins. And that's questing. So of course, if you were doing patrol or quest for the dummy player, and the army that was selected was surrounded by its armies already for patrolling, or the region that gets chosen for it to quest into, it already has an army, that is a case where it would not be able to execute the action, and then you would just take resources for them. So the next 3 actions each just have a cost associated with them. So again, now if the dummy player doesn't have enough of the resource to pay the cost, they will not be able to complete that action, and then you will collect resources for them. So build, I've already mentioned, you will spend ore to go up a level on the tower. So right now, to build, I would need to spend 1 ore to go to this level. If I wanted to go to level 2, I would need to spend 2 ore. So it's very simple for the dummy player on this one. You don't have to roll a die, you just execute the action for them, if they are able to. Otherwise, you collect resources. Research is going up your magic levels. So if you have enough mana, you pay the mana cost and go up. So I could go to level 1 right now by paying that 1 mana, but then I only have 1 mana now. I couldn't get to level 2 until I get more mana. So how would I do that? Well, I could patrol into a forest. Then when I'm following the dummy player, meaning I'm not the active player, I can collect resources, and I would be in 1 forest and I would go up 1. And then the next time I'm able to do the research action, I can pay the 2 mana and go up to the next level. So when expanding, for a human player to expand, you would pay a cost in food equal to the number of armies that you have, including the one you're going to create. So expanding is bringing a new army onto the board. To expand, you will pay the cost in food of all armies that you have, including the new one you are creating. So if I wanted to expand, I have 2 armies already, this is 3, I would have to pay 3 food. For a human player, you must expand into a region where you have only 1 army. I could expand into either of these regions by paying 3 food. So if I did that, pay 3 food, there I am, I've expanded. So when a dummy player expands, they will pay the food necessary to create the new army, but they do not put it with one of their existing armies. They put it in an open region adjacent to one of their armies. So you would just roll the die, take the result, this is a 1, and you put it in the first open region that's adjacent to one of their armies. So 1 is here, boom, that is open, so they would expand right here, and they would pay 3 food. Now for trading, when you trade, you can swap any number of any one resource for that same number of another resource. So if I traded right now, I could swap up to 2 mana for up to 2 ore, 1 mana for 1 ore, or 1 ore for 1 mana. When the dummy player trades, they simply gain 1 of every resource. So if I traded, let's say I did that, I traded 1 ore for 1 mana, now the dummy player is going to follow me, they will just gain 1 of every resource. So they go up 1 food, 1 ore, and 1 mana. So those are all the actions, and at this point we've covered the exploit, the expand, and the explore part of the 4X, but we have not covered the exterminate. So if at the end of any movement, if there are 2 different player armies in the same region, a war will break out. In a multiplayer game, each player can negotiate peace and say they're going to negotiate peace, but you're actually going to choose what you're doing, either choosing a war cost or the white flag if you want to do peace. However, one person could fool the other and say they're going to do peace, and then the other guy, does a war cost and boots him out for a very cheap price. They could just do a war cost of 1, and if the other guy does peace, and he's booted him out. But if they choose peace, they can have an alliance. They can coexist in that space, and they'll be the only 2 players that coexist there until such time as one player breaks the alliance. There's different ways that happens. I'm not going to go into that right now. However, a war with the dummy player cannot end in peace. So let's say I did quest, and I quested into this forest with the dummy player. Now we're going to have war. So you're going to look at the card. If it's day, the dummy player is going to spend a war cost equal to 2 times its number of armies that it has on the board. If it's nighttime, it's only going to be 1 times the number of armies. So if the dummy player has a lot of armies, you don't want to fight them during the day. You'll want to hit them at night, so you have to spend less resources. At least that would be easier. but who knows what your strategy might be. So at this point, if war broke out, they have 3 armies on the board, so it's ×2, so their war cost is 6, so they are spending 6. And now you'll see on all the tracker cards, there's this for war section over here. So when you're spending a war cost, you cannot wager more than you have, and at the end of the war, win or lose, you have to spend the war cost. So all mana counts as 2, and every ore counts as 1, and then food does not count during war. So right now, the dummy player has a war cost of 6. Now the dummy player never has to pay their war cost, so it doesn't matter how many resources they have. They will just simply be the maximum as decided by the side of the compass card. So they are wagering 6. I have to meet or exceed 6. So if I can't meet that, or if I decide not to, then I basically just lose the battle. But right now I have 3 mana, so I could sacrifice all 3 mana, pay all 3 mana to get a 6 war cost, and then I will win the battle. Now in any war, the loser must leave the region. They can either leave by removing their cube completely, or they can retreat. To retreat, you must pay food equal to the number of armies that you have on the board. So right now, to retreat, the dummy player would have to pay 3 food, but they only have 1 food, so they would be forced to remove the cube. So it's a good strategy to have if the opponent is low on food and you think you can beat them in a battle, and you'll know whether you can with the dummy player because the cost is set. Then it's good to do it then because they will simply lose a cube. So to retreat, you would send your cube to an adjacent region if you can. Now retreating cannot start another war, so if the only adjacent regions have opponents, you can't retreat, or if you have an adjacent region with 2 armies, you can't retreat there because there can never be 2 armies in the same space. So if the dummy player did have enough food, if they did have at least 3 food, they could retreat by paying the 3 food. And then you just roll a die to determine which region they retreat into. So there's an 8, it's pointed this way, so we would go 9, 10, 11, 12. So they're gonna retreat there. Well, they would, but remember also the dummy player can never have 2 cubes in the same space. So then by default, they would just retreat there. And actually that, you could have determined that without rolling a die. Sometimes the dummy player, you can tell what they're gonna do without rolling a die because there's only one option. So that's how you resolve wars. So the last thing to mention is the ruins space. So as I mentioned, there's these spaces like this that are considered ruins now. So the manual describes ruins as castle ruins and village rubble are rich in both resources and war stories. Armies that venture into these lands soon find themselves lost, both physically and mentally. So the difference between ruins and other territories are you can only leave a ruin if you're the active player. So if a player chooses patrol and you want to leave the ruins by following them, you can't. You have to be the active player to leave ruins. However, when you produce resources in a ruin, you get to pick whatever resource you want. So it's kind of a wild resource production. So that's kind of cool because then if you can keep an army in at least one ruin during the game, then every time you produce resources, you'll get at least one thing of whatever you want. So the rules didn't really cover how to pick the resource for the dummy player, a resource to each section of numbers. So 1 through 4 could be ore, 5 through 8 could be mana, and 9 through 12 could be food. So let's say the dummy player is going to produce resources, so they would get nothing for the capital city, 1 food for the plains, and then for the ruins, roll a die, it's a 5, so that would be 1 mana. So that's pretty much everything you need to know to play. So in summary, you're going to go back and forth taking actions by rolling die for the dummy player and using the compass and picking whatever you want for yourself. Every time a turn starts, when it's full, you clear them. Every time you clear them, you flip the card. If you're flipping it from day to night, you give the dummy player 1 of each resource. If you flip back, they don't get anything. And then for war, you use this for the war cost of the dummy player. You go to the closest territory if there's more than one option when they're moving or expanding. And you keep going until one of the endgame triggers are met. Then you go till you've filled up the card one more time, clear it, and then at the point you clear it, you count up points. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it helps you get started. If you did like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. So coming soon, I will actually record a solo playthrough of this game so you could really see how it all comes to fruition. And actually, at this point, I've only played 1 solo game of this game. I'm really starting to like it, especially after going through the rules with you right now. I definitely really want to play a multiplayer game, but I'm looking forward to trying it solo again. And until then, game on, end of line.